Welcome to Men of Hope, a Hope Scouting podcast. My name is Bernhard, and today I have Jenny with me. Jenny is ICF accredited trauma-informed Catholic life coach, and she's also certified in deconstructing gaslighting specialist. That's what she is. She is specialized in narcissistic abuse, and you serve as a domestic violence support group facilitator at Hope Scouting as well. And yeah, which is it's very good to know you, Jenny, and I love to have you on here today. And I have this book here of yours in my hands. Don't Plant Your Seeds Among Thorns, a Catholic guide to recognizing and healing from domestic abuse. And I would like to talk about that today, about that topic of domestic abuse and how to heal from, yeah, when we are traumatized or when we have suffered narcissistic abuse. So let me, to all the audience here, quickly read the text on the back of that book. So in this book, Jenny duBay helps survivors of intimate partner violence identify their situation and begin to heal. With empathy and compassion, she covers such topics as what domestic abuse is, the trauma of sexual assault and coercion, verbal attacks and isolation, and the evils of manipulative control with intimate relationships. She also discusses details on what the Catholic Church teaches about personal dignity, sacramental marriages, and the nature of domestic abuse. Jenny reveals the impact intimate abuse has on targets, providing practical and Christ-centered ways to heal, no matter where survivor may be on her journey. Yeah, this is exciting. This is wonderful. Um, because I think this topic of emotional, spiritual, or domestic abuse, or even spiritual abuse within the church, I think is an issue that is way too little talked about. And I'm happy that we are talking about it today. So yeah, it's good to have you, Jenny.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much. This is definitely a topic that needs more discussion in the
Hmm.
church and needs more exposure just to because unfortunately the statistics are about 1 in 3 women and 1 in 8 to 10 men
Hmm.
have been or will be in an abusive intimate relationship or in any abusive relationship at some point in their lives. And that's a devastating statistic.
Yes.
So that's why just bringing this out and talking about it, especially talking about it from a Catholic perspective, so important.
Yes, from the text that we just read, like the two things that pop, like that stand out to me immediately is, you said you are basically shedding light to what domestic abuse is, and also in contrast to the dignity of the human person, right? Um, to these two kind of like topics, the dignity of the human person in contrast with what domestic abuse is, can you share a little bit about that?
Well, when we really realize our true dignity and our true worth in God, being abused is we just can't tolerate that. I mean, when we just really realize and really realizing too what marriage is supposed to be about, because a lot of times we go into marriage, this is, we've never been married before, we don't know, and in abusive situations, we're told, oh, it's just a difficult marriage, but really realizing our dignity, our worth, and what love truly is, as best described in Love and Responsibility. I think that, like, as far as any abuse manual that we might have written by a pope, I'm gonna have to say, like, that is the one, and it's not even about abuse, but that's why it's so potent and so strong, is because it teaches us what healthy relationships are supposed to be. And when we see that, when we realize, oh, we deserve this respect, we deserve love, we deserve are supposed to be responsible towards us, we deserve to be loved and not used, then we really realize, okay, this is abuse. I mean, it can be difficult to recognize abuse in marriages.
Yeah.
especially if the covert type. So that's one of the things in my book. Like I don't go into physical abuse because that's more overt, but the confusing part is that covert part. So that's why like realizing your own dignity and worth really helps to shed light on the covert behaviors that are not valuing dignity and worth.
Yeah. So true. So you mentioned Love and Responsibility by John Paul II, right?
Hmm.
Yes, and I totally agree. Like he is so beautifully describing the dignity of the human person. He just absolutely nails that. I think he calls it personalistic norm, right? That the human person is never like it is never licit for the human person to be used as an object because the human person has the dignity of almost God, right? We are created in the image and likeness of God and is never listed to use the human person, only love. So, yeah, so abuse is basically exactly treating a human person as an object and manipulate and control. You talked about the covert abuse, or also kind of like, yeah, the covert narcissist. I think that's a term that's used a lot in our circles, like coaching and consulting people who deal with trauma. Yeah, can you maybe elaborate here a little bit more? What are the signs of a covert narcissist or a toxic person that behaves in a covert way?
Well, the first thing to understand that's really important to grasp about these situations is that domestic abuse is a pattern. It's an ongoing behavior and a pattern and a cycle. So it's not just like, oh, one incident in your relationship where maybe your spouse acted selfishly, or your spouse said something that they didn't mean, or something cruel, and then apologize later. That's called being human. And
Mm.
in marriage, we're going to do that and we're going to fail, and then we pick ourselves back up and we try again. That's not
Yeah.
abuse. Abuse is, it might be abusive situation where we shouldn't have done that, but again, making amends. And an abusive relationship is when this is a pattern that is ongoing. There's no authentic apology. There might be, in the abuse cycle, there might be a calm phase where they say, oh, I'm sorry, but that's just another manipulation. And so that's again what, going back to use versus love in relationships that are abusive, there's that end goal of like, I'm using you for my narcissistic needs. And with a covert pattern, again, like with physical abuse, it's obvious,
Mhm.
because there's physical harm. With covert, it's so under the radar that it's very confusing. So it can be, for example, playing the victim,
Yeah.
consistently playing the victim, so that the manipulative partner is going to play the victim to the point of like getting the other partner to do whatever he or she wants, just to basically manipulating their empathy and consistently playing on that victimhood role. And that victimhood role also enables them to do something else called blame shifting. So
Mm.
they'll shift the blame of whatever it is that they're thinking that needs to be blamed. They'll shift it, or their own behavior, usually their own behavior, they'll shift it onto the victim
Yeah.
and blame the victim. And then the victim is so utterly confused, like, okay, well, maybe I did say that, or maybe that really was my intention. I didn't think it was, but maybe it was.
Yeah.
So I try to do better. Or so it's just, and a lot of times with covert messaging too can be, well, I'm just saying this for your own good, and then proceeds with saying something really cruel that's not for your own good, but then it's camouflaged in that, well, it's just for your own good. Or another tactic is camouflaging it, well, I'm just joking, saying something cruel and biting and doing that, as a pattern, and just being like, oh, but I'm just joking, can't you take a joke?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
another example of covert abuse.
Yeah. This kind of humble bragging or virtue signaling, right? Like, oh,
Yes.
I'm so humble, I'm so good, and
Yes.
it's you
Yeah.
who is like the blame shifting. Would you say blame shifting is another word for gaslighting? Or
See,
yeah.
gaslighting is like kind of an umbrella term. There's so many, like, so blame shifting is a form of gaslighting. Absolutely, yes. Because
Hmm.
gaslighting is basically one person trying to change the reality of another. So that's what blame shifting is. Like, if you know that you didn't say XYZ,
Yeah.
but your partner saying, no, you said that. That's gaslighting. But so isn't your partner does some sort of behavior and then blames it on you. For example, a very, very common one
Hmm.
is infidelity. So a lot of times, abusive personalities, they will be also unfaithful, whether that be physically unfaithful, um, a pornography addiction, or even, and I mentioned this in the book too, because I bring in theology of the body a lot. You can tell I love John Paul II, but
Yeah.
and how John Paul II elaborates when Christ was talking about looking at a woman lustfully, and he elaborates that even includes your own wife.
Yes.
You're looking at her as an object.
Yes.
So in that blame shifting, it's like, okay, when that person has those interior thoughts and attitudes or is actually acting out sexually like that, they'll blame their partner. Oh, I saw you flirting with that person. I mean,
Mm.
extreme jealousy is
Yeah.
a red flag. And so I saw you flirting with that person, and can just trying to convince her that she flirted. And so that's blame shifting because that's really his behavior, but that's also
Yeah.
gaslighting because then that causes the victim to be like, well, maybe
Yes.
I did flirt with him. I didn't mean to, but maybe I was acting flirty and I really need to, and that withdraw. And that starts like the self-isolation, like I shouldn't go out in public because I'm flirty. I don't even know it. And
Mm.
that's, yeah, that's the blame shifting, but then the gaslighting because it's changing what she knows about herself to be true. And just a disclaimer, I say she because my book is written for women, Catholic women, but I do
Hmm.
realize men are also victims too. So I just
Yeah.
want to throw out there that I'm not.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, and I agree, right? This is so confusing because it's like this covert person or that toxic covert person is basically blaming and shaming you for the very thing that he's doing himself.
Yes, and in the
Yeah.
book, the way I really describe it is I go way back to the beginning. Why not, right? So
Hmm.
what's the beginning? Genesis. And what happens? The snake. He's telling Adam and Eve, "Well, don't you want?" I mean, he's basically projecting. The devil
Yes.
wants to be God. And so he's saying to Adam and Eve, well, don't you want your eyes open? Don't you want to be like God? Well, no, that's what he wants to be. That's not what they want to be. But they get gaslit into this covert snake saying, oh, but this is for your own good. Again, that this is for your own good. Obviously, it wasn't for their own good. And I describe that a lot in a lot more detail in the book. But, he is the father of lies. So,
Yeah. 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 It's so true. And Jenny, would you say just like it's kind of like shifting into other direction a little bit, but we can come back. Would you say that that whole cover toxicity that it is kind of like rising in our society? I mean, I just think about like the LGBTQ community, those alphabet people, or the Black Lives Matter. They all adapt that victim mentality. We are all victims. And so all the other people have to feel guilty and basically do reparation for us, right?
yes, absolutely.
This
We're
is kind
victims.
of,
You have to do what we say. You have to believe what we believe or honor, yeah, because we're victims. Absolutely. It
yeah.
is a societal problem. Definitely.
And there is no solution to the problem, right? Because I'm a because I'm a white male, I have to feel guilty that I'm superior and that all the black people or other races in America are repressed by me or have been repressed or suppressed by past generations. And I should feel guilty and more guilty and more guilty. And they always should feel more victim, victim, victim. And that it's never resolved. Like there's no resolution to that. It's kind
Well,
of like,
it's there, and then entitlement, and then yeah, and but can you see what you were just saying? That creates gaslighting in people. Like, oh, well, I must be this. I'm an entitled white person, so I must be. They're gaslighting society at large. What's the solution? We just keep on doing what we're doing in our own little ways, trying to shed light on things and praying
Mm,
and just all the rosary vigils and all the novenas and all the prayers, and that's
yes,
what we do. And that's the most
exactly.
powerful.
And I like that you mentioned Genesis and went back to the beginning because like in its core, this is a spiritual battle, right? Because who is the most toxic, covert, narcissistic, or narcissistic person in the universe? Like Satan himself, right? Every
Absolutely.
demon is a narcissist, right?
Yes. Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
And that gaslighting, that's what like demonic temptation, that is gaslighting. It's like, oh, you should sleep with that person. It doesn't matter that you're not married. It's for you want to, it's for your good, right? That's gaslighting, that temptation. Or,
Mhm.
you should be whatever sin inclination it is that you're being tempted to do. That's like, and especially if we have a conscious, like, oh, I know that it's not right, but oh no, being tempted.
Yeah.
If we think of the
That
scrutiny letters, but
Yes, so the bad is called good and the good is called bad. And in the end,
exactly.
like when you like basically behave upon these lies, then the devil comes back to you and accuses and shames you for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. There you go. Exactly. Yep,
That's kind of like the tactic, right? Oh my
it
gosh.
is.
Yeah.
It is absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, this is very insightful. And I love like again, I love that you go back to Genesis and the snake because on a spiritual level, how can we fight that spiritual fight, right? I mean, of course, we connect with God, we connect with the saints, but we also have our guardian angels, and we can learn from Saint Michael how he has defeated Satan, right? Like he has defeated Satan with that humility, with that kind of like poverty in spirit. Saint Michael was an archangel, which is the eighth choir of nine, like the hierarchy of angels. They exist in nine different choirs. And Lucifer was actually a seraph, right? He was the highest, one of the highest seraph. And Saint Michael was way down below him, but he challenged him by quis ut Deus, who is like God. And he entrusted, it's like a similar battle with David and Goliath, right? Like the small guy trusting in God, taking upon that poverty in spirit that by myself I cannot win that battle, but I take refuge in God. I surrender to Him. That's kind of like the tactic because I was pondering a lot many times, and I actually want to do a series on spiritual abuse, what it is, how it works, like abuse of conscience and all these things. And then in the end, I would love to give some perspective for the future with like giving hope and sources of how to deal with all that craziness. And I think we truly have to go back to these roots and get angelic help, say Michael and so forth, and all the other angels to learn from them and to fight that spiritual fight, basically. Yeah,
Absolutely. And that sounds great. Like the spiritual abuse, that's really devastating,
yeah,
especially for someone who is faithful and was like, oh, I want to be a good Christian. I want to, so it gets very muddled and confusing. It sounds good to do a series on that because
yeah,
there's a lot to talk about. There really is.
yes, yes,
And even like abuse, and I get into the book too, abuse of like Bible verses.
yes.
That's very common in abusive situations like that. So shedding light, that's the first thing we can do is just shed light on all this.
Yeah, the first step is kind of like psychoeducation, right? You want to raise awareness. Yeah. Can you, Jenny, maybe share a couple of these Bible verses that are usually or in your practice working with victims? Are there some Bible verses that are maybe kind of like easy disposed in a sense of being used to gaslight or used to shame victims?
Ephesians 5:22.
Uh-huh.
Now, wives, be subject to your husbands as to the Lord. Full stop. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
all. That's all. So
yeah.
that line will be used by
Yeah.
abusive spouses as if there isn't anything around it. There's not a verse before, there's not a verse after, there's not a whole beautiful chapter. The whole chapter in Ephesians is beautiful. But no, just full stop. That, we're gonna ignore the part that, well, husbands are
Yeah.
supposed to love their wives as Christ loves the church. So that, I mean, Christ gave his life up for the church. Um,
Yeah.
I dedicate a lot in the book about that, because what that verse really means. It's mutual self-giving, and is which is
Yes.
exactly what the Catholic Church teaches about marriage, mutual self-giving. And when you read the whole chapter, it's like, yeah, okay. And it is easy to be like, if you think of it like if you're submissive to your spouse and your spouse is acting properly, acting like a spouse should, and loving you as Christ loves the church, it's easy to be submissive. We don't like that word nowadays, submissive, but it's true. It is easy for, we'll say wives, because here, for a wife to be submissive to her husband because her husband's goal is her sanctification and her good. Christ doesn't will anything for us except our good. As a matter of fact,
Mm.
he wills our greater good than even we can even imagine.
Yeah.
So if we're married to someone who has that as their focus and foundation, well, of course, being in that kind of a partnership,
Yes.
and that is mutual self-giving, because it's just, again, I go into it more in more detail, but it is
Yes.
fortunately just the line that is just used, and uses it an excuse to be like, well, you have to be submissive, so you have to do whatever I say. No.
Yes. 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 Yeah, we can like let's talk about that more in detail and depth. I think that is very important because I also agree with you, like St. Paul, when he talks about that, how we should love each other in marriage. He doesn't like he has no intention to establish a hierarchy, right, of somebody who has more dignity or more worth or superiority, right? And if you look at Jesus, right? Okay, if the husband should model after Jesus as the bridegroom, how did Jesus love his wife, right? Like, and not just his bride, not just in his passion, but his entire life, right? I think it's Philippians where St. Paul talks about that Christ was God, but he didn't consider that for himself, but he took upon him the position as a slave. I think that cannot be grasped, right? Jesus took upon the sins of his bride, not just in the passion, but his entire life was completely self-surrender and expiating sin for his bride. So, and also we read that God loves us first. Jesus loved us first. So, if the husband should model after Christ here, that means he should do the first step of loving his bride. He should do the first step of reconciliation. He should take upon the sins of his bride and expiate them, um, and so forth, right?
Right. Yes.
There is no hierarchy at all. I mean, actually, when we listen to Jesus, how he was disciplining the apostles when they had these fight upon, like, I want to be sitting next to you, Jesus, in heaven, and so forth. Jesus was scolding the apostles because they had that hierarchical, oh, I want to be the best. I want to sit in heaven next to you, Christ, right? And he clearly tells them, hey, if you want to be up there in heaven, here on earth, you have to first be like the lowest and serve everybody. So I agree with you. Like it is so, yeah, against the gospel to interpret Ephesians 5:22 as Paul want to establish a hierarchy where the husband can be dominant and
Actually, historically, he was doing the exact opposite. So again, this will be a nutshell version of what's in the book, but
yeah.
Paul was building on what is called the household code. So this was common household codes that you can read about in, ancient Roman literature, secular Roman, where they would have like, certain, it was written out, certain household codes. And really the wives were just a step above the servants and the children, the wives and the children. So it was a hierarchy. So he took that. He was writing the way that he wrote Ephesians 5. It was modeled after the household code. So people back then would have read that and recognized it. We don't now because we're not familiar with it, but they would
Hmm.
have. But they would have seen that he really turned everything on its head. He's like, okay, instead of husbands are superior, he said, no, that mutually, in the verse before 522, they have to be mutually submissive to each other. Oh, well, that's pretty radical for 1 AD. That was radical. And then for him again saying that the husband must love his wife as Christ loved the church, that's radical. So
Yeah.
he was taking these known codes and really saying, no, it's a mutual thing. So it was very, and we don't grasp that full impact of how radical it really was back then. But it was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have also seen in my own practice, I mean, I agree with you. I'm also always very cautious when a husband starts to quote Ephesians 5:22, because I have also seen it connected with, uh, I don't know how often you have heard that, Jenny, in your practice, that like from a Catholic perspective, that the church teaches in a sense that when a wife refuses sex to the husband, it can be considered as a mortal sin, right? And
Uh,
then and and then if you combine that with Ephesians 5:22 in a sense that like in that interpretation that it should be a hierarchy here and the husband is the superior and the wife has to submit, with those two kind of like interpretations of church doctrine and the scripture here, you build the foundation for domestic abuse, basically.
Absolutely. And understanding too that that is sexual abuse. That's sexual coercion. So that's another covert, like an overt sexual abuse would be an assault, but that coercion, that is sexual abuse too. And combined with the spiritual abuse if they're using that verse. So that's like a double whammy, but it is, I mean, being coerced into what should be a beautiful, intimate act of mutual self-giving, that's lust, that's not love. So again, we go back to JP2 talking about use versus love. That's one partner using another for his own sexual gratification, rather than being like, I love you. Because if you truly love someone and they're like, right now, no, it's not a good time. I understand, it's there's no coercion. So that coercion itself is sexual abuse, and that's one of the topics I think that I hear about the most because it's so confusing. It's not realized that, oh, this is abuse and this is wrong.
Yeah. So again, the correct interpretations of Ephesians 5:22 and the would be that so I love, since I'm a psychologist and I have studied counseling, I love to read Ephesians 5:22 also, with the glasses of a psychologist, because what we usually do, like specifically like as men, when we are frustrated with our wives, we basically retreat, right? Or we go to the next bar and drink, or we go to, I don't know, all kinds of things. We usually walk away from our family because I don't feel respected and honored in my house. So that's why I just walk away in a sense. And Paul actually says here, yeah, don't do that, because you should love your wife like Christ loved the church, to take upon the cross. I mean, it's understandable sometimes we need a little break, but I should not go to the next, I don't know, brothel and drink, or maybe go to prostitutes or whatever, or pornography or whatever. Um, but yes, I should take upon my cross and go back to my wife and see how I can resolve that, right?
Right.
And I think what I often see also, what is a huge temptation for women is that they tend, when they are stressed or annoyed or frustrated, they tend to criticize their husbands a lot. And that's kind of like the opposite of how a husband needs to be loved. Like women needs to feel loved and husband needs to feel honored, right? Like generally speaking, kind of like that tendency. And criticism is the opposite of honor, and walking away is the opposite kind of love. So I think St. Paul can be interpreted here very psychological, not in a sense of establishing a hierarchy, but actually telling us those are different ways of how we should love in marriage.
I like that. I never thought of it that. Yeah.
Yeah, good. What else can you share with us, Jenny? Because you worked with many survivors of domestic abuse. Do you have any stories you feel comfortable sharing? Yeah, give us some more wisdom on that whole topic. To narrow down my question, maybe I can ask about, because you mentioned here also, we talked about that recognizing part, and you do a lot of explanation and helping clients find more insight, what would be the next step to heal from domestic abuse? What do you usually do to guide your clients also to heal?
Once they recognize what's going on, I mean, that's a big step in itself
Mhm.
because again, with that gaslighting and typically they're being told it's just a difficult marriage, but it's normal. My behavior is normal. The abuser will say that you're to blame. And so they just don't recognize, especially when it's covert. So just getting that information first and foremost of like, no, this isn't normal. This is a pattern. That's like a huge way of getting that first step. And once you have that first step, it's like that, it's the radical acceptance of just like, okay, this is my situation. And it's not saying radical acceptance of the situation doesn't mean, okay, I radically accept that I'm in an abusive relationship, so that's my cross to bear, and I guess that's where I am. No, it's radically accepting I'm in an abusive relationship. And now that I admit that fully without minimization, what can I do to change? Meaning not that a victim can do anything themselves to change and it's going to change their partner or change their relationship. They can't change anyone else, but within. Okay, what am I going to do basically to heal? And once they're on that path and their hearts have been open to that, it's really just that Christ-centered approach of
Yeah.
realizing it's so we're kind of going back full circle to what we talked about at the beginning and that personal dignity. So once they realize, okay, this is abuse, the next real step is getting them to realize how much they are loved by Christ and in Christ, and as a child of God and a bride of our divine bridegroom. And so realizing their worth, their integrity, and how beautiful they are. And that makes me think of Song of Songs because I am a Hope's Garden person, so I always
Mm.
have to go back there. But when the bridegroom says, "How beautiful you are, my love, how beautiful," helping these women realize they are beautiful and they deserve to be loved, not used. And that just developing that interior Christ-centered strength and really diving into the love of Christ is just so powerful and so healing and gives them that strength to lift the fog of abuse and that strength to be able to discern what their next step should be. It's going to be different for everyone,
Mm.
but just having that Christ-centered place can help them discern what to do next.
Yeah. So you basically the healing approach also like through Christ, through scripture, receiving that love from him, you also help your clients kind of walk away or walk. Oftentimes when like covert narcissistic abuse victims have kind of oftentimes developed a kind of codependency, right?
Correct.
And it's very hard to make things different or make steps different that move away from that dependency. But what I hear you say is kind of like the next step of after I recognize the abuse and accept it. And I think the radical acceptance is also that I cannot change that topic person, right? Like it's something that God
Exactly.
has to do. And then in the next step, you kind of help them to slowly but surely make steps that walk away from that codependent behavior.
And that would be the trauma bond. That behavior is caused by a trauma bond. So the trauma bond is created because of the abuse cycle. The abuse cycle is basically you have the honeymoon phase where everything is great. So someone who's abusive is not always that way. And
Yeah.
that's what makes it so confusing. If they were
Yeah.
always like this, horrible person, you'd be like, okay, I don't... but there's that good side that they show and that love. It feels like love and even apologies can be done in this honeymoon stage. And then you have a calm stage where there's, maybe not so many flowers and candy, or even proverbial ones, but it's just calm. Everything is okay. And then like a tension buildup where you can just feel within you, ooh, something, it's like, the tea kettle's starting to boil. It's not boiled over yet, but and then the explosion phase, which doesn't mean overt explosion necessarily. It can, but it can also be covert, which could be just, you know, various techniques, even if it's
Mm,
just silent treatment or but just something,
mm,
an abusive incident, and then it starts all over again. But
yeah.
that causes a trauma bond, and that brain cocktail. all the hormones in your mind. It's not just an emotional thing, it's a physical thing, because you release hormones in the honeymoon stage, the feel good hormones of like, oh, he's
Yeah.
me again. I have another crumb now. And then, really you release other hormones of the fight, flight, freeze, your nervous system's on overdrive when you're being attacked. And so that repetitive cycle does create just like this, it's almost a dependency, like a drug dependency, so to speak.
Wow.
It's been compared with that. So, you have to break that bond, which is I will admit, that's really, really hard to do when you're still actively living with an abuser because you're still going to be in
Yeah.
that cycle. But part of that, what I love is like for me personally, what helped to break that trauma bond was to be bonded to Christ.
Mm.
And that was with like the Hope's Garden Brides of Christ classes where we dive into the Song of Songs. That for me was like transformative. I was like, wow, okay, Christ, just like relying on him. It's a journey. It's a journey. It's a long journey, but
Wow.
and breaking the trauma bond is a lot more difficult. It's a lot more difficult than we can get into here, but that's essential.
Yeah, thank you for explaining these stages. Yeah, I can see how what a trap that can be, like that honeymoon phase, right? People also call it like love bombing, right? Like that
Exactly.
there's so much love bombing and it truly feels good. It feels like, wow, you're on a honeymoon. That's the perfect person, right? But it only like I have realized like with many cases that I have seen and all the literature that I read, usually that honeymoon phase is about 3 months like or in new relationships, right? It kind of like you have maybe 3 months, and then after these 3 months, you start seeing a more clear picture of that person. I don't know. Um, yeah, you can, of course, yeah, let me know what you think about that. But when I talk with young people who fall in love and such, give it 3 months before you make big decisions. And maybe you start seeing red flags. Maybe not. Maybe it is a beautiful love that starts to build up, but it can also be that you're basically groomed, right? It's very hard in that honeymoon stage to distinguish grooming from authentic love.
Yeah, and it's the amount of time really depends on it varies, but one thing, knowing the red flags before you marry is really a
Yeah.
bonus because they're covert too. Again, like going back to the jealousy. So extreme jealousy. That could be construed as, oh, because I love you so much, I've never met anyone like you before, ever. And I just love you. And so that's like, oh, that you don't see that as a red flag because it's covered in this flowery language, but it is. And generally with
Mhm.
abusive relationships, there is a rush. So like that love bombing, and again, not necessarily, so everyone's experience is different, but very typically it's a rush to fall in love quickly or to have a commitment quickly.
Yeah.
So if there's a rush in the relationship and you try to slow it down and your partner's like, no, I don't want to slow it down, that's a red flag. And going slow, yes, is very good. So getting to thoroughly know the person in the good times and in the bad. So like when there's stress, how does your partner react to stress? Does he or she blame you, even if you had nothing to do with it? Or do they just say, oh, I'm sorry, I had a really rough day at work. I need some
Yeah.
alone time," or what. So going slowly in any new relationship, that's key. And then learning the signs.
Yeah, yeah. What are some other signs? Because this is truly, I think, very important because in that love bombing honeymoon phase, this is actually pretty, like what you said earlier, it's not just an emotional dependency or where you get connected with another person with, those hormones of oxytocin that help us to bond. You're saying it can, like, because of those hormones that are involved, even become kind of like a physical
Hmm.
addictive almost dependency because the hormones, the love emotions are just beautiful in the beginning. So you mentioned jealousy as one red flag. Then the person don't allows you your own comfortable pace, like the relationship is rushed in a sense. What are some other red flags? Like that subtle condescension, right? You are subtly criticized and condescended all the time.
Yeah. But it's so
Yeah.
subtle that it's hard to detect, but it's there. Another sign is belittling or very frequently criticizing and not saying anything good about other people. So maybe you're at this point,
Yeah.
nothing bad is being said about you, but no one else can do anything right. Or if there's trouble in your partner's life, let's say there's trouble at work. Well, it's always everyone else's fault. Now, of course, in some legitimate situations, it is someone else's, giving problems at the workplace. I'm talking about everything. It's not like, oh, here's the situation that happened at work, and it's like the police officer is to blame for stopping me for speeding.
Mm.
Sure, I'm speeding, but it's the police officer's fault. He just has it out to get me.
Yeah.
Doesn't like me. My boss doesn't like me. My coworker doesn't like me. The coworker's best friend doesn't like me. It's all their fault. Just that consistent pattern. And again,
Yeah.
being the victim, but if you're being love bombed, you're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Just your life is so. I mean, it plays on your heartstrings, right? But that is a sign. If you're seeing that as a pattern and that's consistent, because we know in life we're to blame for some things and other people are to blame for some things because we're
Mm.
human and we make mistakes, but it's not just like so black and white, which is another thing, black and white thinking.
Yeah. And not owning their own emotions, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like the deflecting responsibility, I think. Yeah. And that belittling, that's so interesting, right? Because you can actually ask yourself the question, oh, when that person criticizes everybody else when that person is with me, is that person criticizing me when he is with other persons, right? Yeah.
And another one I like to add, just of my own personal observation too, is how does your new partner treat their parents?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Is there respect there? Even if there's a difficult relationship, and often there is there respect or is there disparagement? So, and even if there was a really terrible abusive childhood, you can have someone tell you about their own abusive childhood because they want to share because they're in a new relationship. That's one thing. But detecting seething resentment. Okay, so someone who has abusive tendencies tends to hold on to their resentments
Yes.
and kind of wear them like a badge. Like I have every right. I have a right to be this way or do that because of this, and I'm gonna cling. There's not really that desire to forgive because they feel the other person doesn't deserve forgiveness. And so
Mm.
clinging to resentments and clinging to those things rather than seeking healing, they cling to the negative. That's a huge red flag.
Yeah, good. And then another one that I just popped into my mind is isolation, right?
Absolutely.
The toxic person is slowly but surely isolating you from your friends. He wants to be exclusive, right?
Yes.
From your family and so forth. Yeah.
So that goes
Yeah.
back to like, okay, maybe disparaging the friends. Why do you hang out with those people? They're stupid. They're this, they're that, or whatever. Same with, family or creating tension within the family. So that's pretty common. Because if there's then tension, you don't want to be with your family. Or again, back to the jealousy, frequently accusing the partner of infidelity or flirting. So that will have her seek isolation because she's like, I don't want to go out and get accused again.
Mm.
Or another covert trick would be to be like, oh, it's okay for you to go out with your girlfriends tonight. Fully support you doing that. And then the next time you see him, he's like, you ditched me for your friends and playing the victim and making it feel really uncomfortable. Like, okay, I guess I don't want to go out with my friends
Yeah.
again because, or accusing you. I know you went out with your friends and I know you went out to a bar and I know you were flirting and I know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that causes isolation because you just don't want to have to deal with those conflicts.
Yeah. In meeting with other people or even meeting with you, they have their own timeline, right? Like you have to be super on time and like follow their needs to being on time or the schedule have to be followed, but they themselves will never stick to your timeline.
Exactly. Very, very hypocritical. Yeah. It's like you have to do these things, but the rules don't apply to me. This is just for you.
Yes. Wow. Yeah, this is so good to learn about these red flags. This is gold. And then to also learn the healthy signs of relationships, right? Like, which would be the opposite, kind of like there's a comfortable pace in the relationship. There is like affirmation. There is respect for each other. There, I give enough space for the other person to discern certain things on their own. I'm not isolating them. I'm actually appreciating their friends and family. Of course, that like there is a natural aspect of maybe sometimes I don't feel the same way about certain friends and family. That can be totally normal, but in general, there's a respect, right?
Right.
So the person, a healthy person, is able to own one's own emotion and take responsibility of one's own life. Yeah,
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 and that also reminds me of, another red flag being like if the person you're with is totally perfect for you in that every single thing you like, they like, and every single thing you don't like, they don't like, whether it be huge things like abortion. Okay, you agree on the abortion issue, that's wonderful. But also green beans, or what so if everything mirrors, that's kind of like, well, you should have some disagreements. Maybe I like peas. I mean, who cares?
yeah,
And then, but in a toxic relationship, if you say something, it can be even that small, like, I think peas are the best vegetables ever. No, you are wrong. Peas are disgusting. Like, you're blamed for liking peas. I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous, but it happens. Versus in a healthy relationship, of course, you can be, oh, you like peas? Oh, that's great. I don't like them, but whatever. Who
exactly.
cares? So that's another.
Your personal freedom is basically respected, right? Your likes
Right.
and dislikes are respected.
Exactly.
And the problem is with the toxic people, they have a very narrow agenda.
Hmm.
And that narrow agenda is also projected on others. Like they choose their friends or their, I don't know, relationship partners. They all have to fit into that narrow agenda. And if they don't, they're basically not interested or not interesting or kicked out of the life or yeah.
Yep. Well, abuse is all about power and control. And they
Yes.
have to have control over everything, even the thoughts of the person that they're targeting. Even their thoughts. So you have to
Yeah.
think the way I think or the way I want you to think. Yeah.
Which brings another, like maybe that could be our last point today to talk about the abusive person wanting to control the thoughts of the other person, which also implies controlling their conscience.
Hmm.
And I think that's another topic that is way too little talked about in our Catholic Church. Like we are all taught how important the virtue of obedience is, of course, first and foremost to God. But in religious orders, we also are taught that obedience to our superiors and so forth, or to the magisterium. Of course, we are obedient to the magisterium, but the church also teaches that my personal conscience is my personal vicar of Christ. I would love to ask our audience here if you ever have if you have ever heard that in a homily or in I don't know that your personal conscience is your personal vicar of Christ, which means if a pastor, a priest, a bishop, or even the Pope, I don't know, tells you you should get that vaccine, or I don't know, anything where you in your conscience cannot agree to that, that priest, that pastor, that pope, that bishop has no authority, no right to demand obedience here because you have to listen to your conscience. And I think we are not very well catechized on our conscience. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And especially in today's world where it's like your truth is as good as my truth. So my conscience says it's perfectly fine to whatever. That's not the conscience that the church is talking about. It's that well-formed conscience and virtue that God conscience, basically. It's that voice of the Holy Spirit that tells you and guides you, and you know what the truth is.
Yes.
So we get that confused in today's world because today's world is very self-focused. It really is.
Yes. Yeah, that's for sure true that our conscience has to be formed and educated properly and sharpened in the sense. Yeah. But I think if we learn more about the dignity of our own person and also that freedom that God gave us and that help of our conscience that God gave us, I think we would not so easily slip, for example, into codependency, or we would not so easily slip of not seeing the red flags when we are in love, for example. And I think that's something that I want to study and research more on. What is the church's teaching actually on our conscience?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be interesting.
Great. Jenny, well, this was amazing. Like, I love that conversation. And you are a Catholic author as well. I'm sorry, I didn't mention that in the very beginning. And you told me that you have another book that was published recently, right?
Yes, I have World Between Worlds. I don't know if you can see it. It's a
Uh-huh.
novel based on the early life of Saint Catherine of Siena. So there's a sequel in the works. But it was just a fascinating journey, just researching and
Hmm.
reading this book. It was such a blessing. So this one was just published a few months ago.
That is very exciting. Jenny, we should definitely have you on here again and talk about that book.
I would love to.
Yes,
I'd love that.
we will
But
do.
a warning, if you get me talking about Catherine of Siena, I'll talk for a few hours. At least, at minimum, maybe a few days.
All right, we will do that for sure.
Okay, sounds great.